WCLC's sister congregation, Tri-UU in Summerfield, invites us to a marathon public reading of Fahrenheit 451. How many of you read that back in the day? We did. There's a book about book burning, and on Saturday, March 18th, from 9:30 to 3 o'clock. You can listen to the whole book, or you can come and hear part of it. There will be readers from Tri-UU and the interfaith community, as well as teachers and students from the area. The Board of Trustees participated in training about transition teams with Reverend Snavely last Friday and are now consulting with potential members for that team. The board will be making selections for that team at the next regular board meeting on March 22nd. Are there any other announcements, brief announcements from the floor? None today. Okay. We gratefully acknowledge the traditional lands of the Timucua Native peoples upon whose ancestral homeland our church stands today. We are blessed with this land, and we vow to care for it as Mother Earth cares for us and for all living things. All are welcome here this morning. Thank you for sharing your Sunday with us. Reverend Cynthia has opening words for us now.
I thought we were welcoming guests. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, we did already.
Okay. Our opening words today are from 20th century Spanish painter and sculptor Pablo Picasso, who said, "Every act of creation is first an act of destruction."
If you are here for the first time or after come back to us after a long absence, and only if you are comfortable doing so, please raise your hand and a microphone will reach you and you can tell us who you are, maybe where you came from, and what brought you here today. Do we have anyone? Andrea, would you do our lighting today? That's what happens when you sit in the front row. Yeah. Okay. We gathered this hour as people of faith, with joys, sorrows, gifts, and needs. We light this beacon of hope, a sign of our quest for the truth and meaning in celebration of life we share together. Kristen Robinson. And you may remain seated for Spirit of Life.
Each week, we offer time for you to share your joys and concerns. By placing a stone or stones in the sand, there's a station both at the front and at the back of the sanctuary. If you wish to share silently, you may begin. If anyone wishes to share aloud, raise your hand and wait for a microphone.
Hi, I'm Susan. Good morning. Is this on? Is this okay? All right. So, my middle brother, I'm the youngest, and I have an older brother. My middle brother, died, very unexpectedly. So I really thought that I had a handle on, what it would be like to lose our loved ones, because our parents died, but he was, 69 and in what seemed to be good health. So he was traveling, he was doing what he loved. Everybody keeps saying that, but somehow it doesn't make it easier. He was in Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam, just wanting to experience those cultures. And I got a call from his daughter, his only child. I got a call on Wednesday that he had died in Vietnam, and we still don't know why. And it's gonna be 2 months. So I know some people already know and whatever, but this was such a huge tragedy in my life, so I'll turn it back.
Bring it to Susan. If there is someone who hasn't been named that you hold concern for, you may name them aloud at this time.
Dee Dee, Terry, Debbie, Barbara, Dorothy.
For all those named, and for those whose names are too tender to speak, we collectively hold them in the light of our compassion and the warmth of our community. Please join me in reading together this congregation's covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and through service we live our principles. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. The interlude this morning is a reading from the spiritual writer Hugh Nissenson in the book Spiritual Quests. Nissenson writes, 30 years ago, on a rainy February night in Tel Aviv, I started reading Martin Buber's Moses, the Revelation and the Covenant. I reached chapter 5, called Divine Demonism, which begins, while Moses makes his way to Egypt with wife and child at the divine behest, something strange, according to the biblical narrative, happens to him, something which apparently runs counter to the mission. In the night lodge, the Lord attacks him and wishes to slay him. I had known that night demon since I was 6. It was the angel of death. Was it God? Buber said that God attacked Moses because that's part of God's basic character. God takes complete possession of the one God has chosen. God took Enoch away. God demanded Isaac as a sacrifice. God wrestled all night with Jacob and crippled him before God blessed him. I read, if a power attacks a person and threatens that person, it is proper to recognize the Lord in it or behind it, no matter how nocturnally dread and cruel it might be. And it is proper to withstand God, since after all, God does not require anything else of me than myself. The words of the prophet of exile, who makes peace and creates evil, I, the Lord, do all this, have roots that go very deep. Yes, this was my God. God's demonic nature was part of God. God was one. Buber's words melded God for me into one being. God was the single source of creation and destruction, life and death, good and evil. I looked through the streaked window at the cloudy sky. God made the universe in God's own image, a unity. I recited the Hebrew prayer, which I understood for the first time. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It is our practice at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lake County to give generously to this congregation that is our spiritual community. We give as we are able, remembering both this congregation's meaning in our lives and its impact on the world. You may donate today in the wooden box in the narthex or by any of the methods on the screen. Thank you for your donation today. Our hymn is number 23, Bring Many Names. We're going to be singing verses 1, 4, 5, and 6. I invite you to stand as you're comfortable.
Bring many names, beautiful and good, celebrate in parable and story, holiness and glory, living, loving God. Hail and Hosanna, bring many names. O aching God, do your greatest care, calmly piercing evil's new disguises, Gladys who surprises, wiser than despair. Hail and Hosanna, old aching God, young growing God, eager still to know, willing to be changed by what you've started, quick to be delighted, singing as you go. Hail and Hosanna, young growing God, great living God, never fully known, joy, darkness far beyond our seeing, closer yet than breathing, everlasting home. Hail and Hosanna, great living God.
Of reading her religious poems at the Unitarian Church in Brattleboro, Vermont, May Sarton said, I suppose it went all right, but I felt that the kind, intelligent people gathered in a big room looking out over pine trees did not really want to think about God, God's absence, or God's presence. Both are too frightening. Sarton begins one of her religious poems, Invocation to Kali, with a quote from Joseph Campbell. The black goddess Kali, the terrible one of many names, difficult to approach, whose stomach is a void and so can never be filled, and whose womb is giving birth forever to all things. It is the time for the invocation, writes Sarton, to atone for what we fear most and have not dared to face. Kali, the destroyer, cannot be overthrown. We must stay open-eyed in the terrible place. Every creation is born out of the dark. Every birth is bloody. Something gets torn. Kali is there to do her sovereign work, or else the living child will be stillborn. She cannot be cast out. She is here for good, nor battled to the end. Who wins the war? She cannot be forgotten, jailed, or killed. Heaven must still be balanced against her. Out of destruction, she comes to wrest the juice from the cactus, its harsh spine. And until she, the destroyer, has been blessed, there will be no child, no flower, and no wine. It is time for the invocation. Kali, be with us. Violence, destruction, receive our homage. Help us to bring darkness into the light, to lift out the pain, the anger, where it can be seen for what it is, the balance wheel for our vulnerable, aching love. Put the wild hunger where it belongs, within the act of creation. Crude power that forges a balance between hate and love. Help us to be always hopeful gardeners of the spirit, who know that without darkness, nothing comes to birth, as without light, nothing flowers. Bear the roots in mind. You, the dark one, Kali, awesome power. I have said more than once, I don't know if I have said more than once in this context, but I have said that my concept of God is not a person. But in moments when I need some personal representation or symbol for God, Kali would now be my choice. Creator and destroyer. My concept of God and C.S. Lewis's are nowhere near the same. Nevertheless, I share this from Lewis. In the first book in the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, before the four Pevensie children have met Aslan, they talk with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver about him. In the conversation, Susan and Lucy find out that Aslan is a lion. "Ooh," said Susan, "I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe?" "I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion." "That you will, dearie, and make no mistake," said Mrs. Beaver. "If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they're either braver than most or else just silly." "Then he isn't safe," said Lucy. "Safe?" said Mr. Beaver. "Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe. But he's good. He's the king, I tell you." Personally, I do not believe in a God who is a person who can be described as a king, but I do believe in something holy and sacred and not safe. I could call that God. I could call it the Tao. I could call it life with a capital L. I do not believe that life is safe. I do believe that we human beings can choose to make it good. And in that, we can find the sacred in the midst of violence and the destruction that are part of life. And in that, I believe there is blessing. Where is the holy, the sacred in war? Where is the holy in a disease epidemic or an earthquake? Where is the sacred in an act of terrorism? Where is the holy, the sacred in an act of police violence? Rabbi Harold Kushner, writer of When Bad Things Happen to Good People, says, "We could bear nearly any pain or disappointment if we thought there was a reason behind it, a purpose to it. But even a lesser burden becomes too much for us if we feel it makes no sense. The question we should be asking is not, why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? That is really an unanswerable, pointless question. A better question would be, now that this has happened to me, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? In the answer to that question can be found the sacred. The sacred in a war can be seen in those who risk their lives to get the wounded to a hospital, and in those who keep that hospital open, even with few supplies and under threat of bombardment. It is in those who welcome in the refugees and help them to begin again. And it is in the refugees who find enough hope and strength to make a new beginning. Pardon us for a technical problem again. Are we still going out to the Zoom, folks? Thank you. The holy in a disease epidemic is found in policymakers who seek to find ways to control the epidemic and to prevent it happening again. The sacred in a disease epidemic is found in the doctors, the nurses, and the family members who care for the afflicted. The holy in an earthquake is seen in those who dig through the rubble, hoping to rescue one more person, or at least allow a family to bury their dead. The sacred in an act of terrorism is found in the people who come together to say, this is too much. It is in those who seek to find ways to stop our own senseless violence, and in those who care for those who have lost loved ones and those who have been injured. The sacredness in police violence is in a community coming together in protest. And it is in police themselves committing to a community to serve them and not to fear or condemn them. Sarton, in her very long poem, The Invocation to Kali, notes that Kali lives within us. Anguish is always there, she writes, lurking at night, wakes us like a scourge, the creeping sweat as rage is remembered, self-inflicted blight. What is it in us we have not mastered yet? What hell have we made of the subtle weaving of nerve with brain that all centers tear? We live in a dark complex of rage and grieving. The machine grates whatever we are. The kingdom of Kali is within us deep, the built-in destroyer, the savage goddess, wakes in the dark and takes away our sleep. She moves through the blood to poison gentleness. Sometimes we don't even realize she's there. Back in 2016, someone sent me a link to an article by Tom Jacobs in Pacific Standard magazine. In a series of studies, a University of Iowa research team led by Andrew Todd finds images of the faces of 5-year-old Black boys are sufficient to trigger whites into heightened threat mode. Implicit biases commonly observed for Black men appear to generalize even to young Black boys, the researchers wrote in the journal Psychological Science. The first of their experiments featured 63 college undergraduates who completed a categorization task in which 2 images flashed on the monitor in quick succession. Participants were instructed to ignore the first time, which was always a face. It merely signaled that the second image was about to happen. The task was to quickly and accurately categorize the second image, the target object, as a gun or a toy by pressing one of 2 response keys. In fact, the faces, all of 5-year-old boys with neutral facial expressions, were a key component of the experiment. 6 of them featured Black children and 6 white. Researchers wanted to know whether the race of the child would affect the speed and the accuracy of the white participants' responses. It did. Participants identified guns more quickly after Black child primes than after white child primes, whereas they identified toys more quickly after the white child primes than after Black child primes. Subsequent experiments found Black 5-year-old faces produced just as strong an effect as photographs of adult Black males. This held true when white participants were labeling images as guns or tools, and when they were shown a list of words, including criminal and peaceful, and asked to categorize each as safe or threatening. In that last experiment, participants misidentified safe words as threatening more often after seeing a Black face, and misidentified threatening words as safe more often after seeing a white one, child or adult. These racial biases were driven entirely by differences in automatic processing, Todd and his colleagues write. In other words, no conscious thought was involved. Whites simply saw a Black face and reacted in ways that indicated a heightened level of perceived threat, even when the face was that of a 5-year-old. Sarton writes, Kali, the destroyer, cannot be overthrown. We must stay open-eyed in the terrible place. Every creation is born out of the dark. Every birth is bloody. Something gets torn. Kali is there to do her sovereign work, or else the living child will be stillborn. So, are we just to let things be? This is just how the world is? But to paraphrase Rabbi Kushner, now that this has happened, now that this is the way things are, what can I do about it? When we see violence, when we see something, someone or some community being harmed or destroyed, what can we do to make a difference? Knowing our own unconscious biases, we may think twice. and address them. We may send aid to help victims of natural disasters. When the destruction of natural disasters are aggravated by human choices, we can advocate for changes. We can make changes in our own lives and on our own property. Rabbi Kushner says we could bear nearly any pain or disappointment if we thought there was a reason behind it, a purpose to it. But even a lesser burden becomes too much for us if we feel it makes no sense. The question we should be asking is not, why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? That's really unanswerable. A better question would be, now that this has happened to me, what am I going to do about it? I think of the nonprofit MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It was founded by a mother whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver. MAD is one example of someone turning their personal tragedy into a blessing for others. And I might hope some healing also for herself. In December of 2014, mothers who said their unarmed sons were killed by police came together and met with officials of the United States Department of Justice. I am sure no one wants to become a part of that group, but that these women have found one another and are seeking change together can help them bring meaning to the violence that has disrupted their lives. Growing up Christian, I was taught that God was all-powerful and all good. How then does one explain war, deaths of children, tsunamis, earthquakes, killings by those society looks to protect life? Rabbi Kushner concludes that God is not all-powerful. He writes, I believe in God, but I do not believe the same things about God that I did years ago when I was growing up or when I was a theological student. I recognize God's limitations. God is limited in what God can do by the laws of nature and by the evolution of human nature and human moral freedom. He says, I no longer hold God responsible for illnesses, accidents, and natural disasters because I realize that I gain little and I lose so much when I blame God for those things. I can worship a God who hates suffering but cannot eliminate it more easily than I can worship a God who chooses to make children suffer and die for whatever exalted reason. That is Kushner's solution. I have gone a different route. I no longer believe in a God who is all-powerful or good or even some kind of being with volition and will. There is no Aslan God King in my theology. For me, the something holy and sacred is more like the Tao than a personal God, more life with a capital L than a being who creates and controls life. More as the Christian theologian Paul Tillich describes it, not being, but the ground of all being. Because it is the common word in my society, I will still use the word God to describe that sacred and holy something that connects us to one another. This life, capital L, that is not safe. It is up to us to make it good. I believe that sometimes what is necessary in order to do that is to get angry about the destruction and violence in the world. Kali, the destroyer, is also the destroyer of evil. She wears a necklace of skulls around her neck They are the skulls of the demons she has destroyed. When I was a child, I was taught that anger was a sin. I do not believe that now. There are some things we should be angry about. Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., peaceful people, were also angry people. They turned that anger to righting wrongs and bringing more good to the world. Dr. King said, "I say to you, my friends, there are certain things in our nation and in the world about which I am proud to be maladjusted, in which I hope all people of goodwill will be maladjusted until the good society is realized. I say very honestly that I never intend to become adjusted to segregation and discrimination. I never intend to become adjusted to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism, the self-defeating effects of physical violence. Now that this has happened to me, or to my community, what am I going to do about it?" That question can lead us to find the sacred in destruction and violence. Neurologist, psychiatrist, and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, says, "A human could be defined as the being who invented the gas chambers for human extermination. But the human can also be defined as the being who entered the gas chambers upright, with the Lord's Prayer or the Shema Israel on the lips." Did the people who entered the gas chambers like that change anything? We might say they didn't. But is that so? Perhaps each act of defiance, each act of strength, each act of hope does make a difference. I do not believe that life is safe. I do believe that we human beings can choose to make it good. And in that, we can find the sacred, the holy, in the midst of the violence and the destruction. And in that, there is blessing. Our next hymn is 1015 in the Teal hymnal. We'll be singing verses 1 through 4 with an adjustment to be more inclusive in verse 3.
Though the days be dark with storms, and burdens weigh my heart, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. When sorrow heals my soul, and burdens make me strong, the troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. My sibling in my heart, my cousin in We extinguish this, this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
The closing words are from 20th century American and British poet T.S. Eliot, who wrote, "What we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from." When the song Weave starts, please rise as you are comfortable. Raise your palms toward your neighbors as we weave together in love to end our service. Please enjoy the music as you depart, and refreshments are available for everyone in the social hall.
We was together, unity and love. We was together, we was together, together.